So this is the Metal Origins 234/2 Puma. I've just started on it. As you can see, everything comes, it's well labeled in the bags. I'm doing just the metal parts right now. I'm currently working on the suspension components. I'll show you the trick for getting these on. It took me a while to figure it out. So you slide that through. See if I can't get this where you can see it. And then you have to kind of get it in that sweet spot and then lift it. I tried going from the top, I tried going from the bottom, but this is the way it's got to go in. This is the only way. You can only get this kit from Germany right now. Some eBay in the States, but still even cheaper with the shipping. When I got it, it was for the basic kit, it was around $400, and the shipping was free. That was around the holidays. I think it may have gone up since then. I also got the updated swing arms and the turret rotation, and I bought their motor for it. I had a servo myself. As you can see, these are a little bit of a bugger to get in. Alright, you can see that portion's complete, and then we'll move on to the shock towers for the suspension components. What I failed to mention is initially these two pieces are separate, and then you have to put this other, I believe it holds the armor. So you're going to want to have a good set of tools for this. I'd recommend these Chapman American made. They have a nice little ratcheting end for them. Works very well in tight spaces. It's terrific for hobbies, cars, anything. Highly recommend them. Alright. So I like using Loctite on these. I'll go ahead and I'll just put a drop on it. None of these, without this, I think you're going to have problems with these backing out since it is an RC. Don't want to over tighten these and strip it. It is some sort of an alloy. Now it looks like they shorted me some of these screws. Not enough to put on all the towers. I'll look in some of the other parts bags and see if there's some extras in those that I can use. If not, I believe I should have some extras. It is just a normal 2.5 by 6 millimeter screw. Correction, they didn't short me on it. If I had read the instructions correctly, I was only supposed to do one side, so there were only 10 of these screws, enough to do 2 for each, and then on the right side you only put 1 in. I don't know why that is, but there's the instructions. So I'll scavenge off the other ones in order to make one complete side. So they're all on per the instructions. Now we're going to work on the drive assembly. Alright, I just test fit all these pieces together. They're actually machined very well. As you can see, This will go to the drive assembly. So it'll come up underneath those towers and meet it. This will be the other side. So each end has got these supports. Alright, I'll show you how I do one of them. Has a little snap ring. As you can see, one on either side. So I got held up a little bit with this, and I'll tell you why. If you look at the instructions right here, all the pieces that are in bag 4 are missing these, and I didn't realize until I looked really closely those are bearings. And that's in the separate bag, not a part of 4. That's this one. So if you have that same issue when you're doing this, that's where they are. So I should have showed this at the beginning. This is the rest of the boxes. Everything's labeled. All the new, all the upgrade components. When I bought it, it came. It was packed great for shipping from Germany. It only took, I think, 6 days to get here from Germany. I get stuff from California, it takes longer than that at times. So as I said, I was looking for bearings. I just couldn't get them to fit correctly. Turned out they weren't bearings, but plastic bushings. And in some of the supplementary instructions, it talks about using, replacing these, which are right here, with bearings, which I will probably do. But if you're like me and you're looking everywhere for those things, here's what they look like. There's 2 plastic trees, and there are these bushings right here, which should hold up fairly well until I can replace them with a set of bearings. So I guess I was correct after all. Here are the bearings, and the kit came with the upgrade from using these small bushings to use the bearings. The problem is the bearings don't slide on shafts. So I'm going to see if I can just sand it a little bit with some 600 grit to get them to slide onto the shaft, because the bearings would be held in these 2 retainers. Alright, I think you can see this. So here's the completed piece. Had to press those bearings on just using my vise. For those of you who may have worked on 1/32 slot cars, this is about the scale size for this shaft. This will connect the half shafts, and as you can see, the bearings roll nice, which is, I'm sure, much better than what I would see with the if I were to use the plastic bushings. So here's the upgraded components, and I'm just showing it to you now. These will go in once I make all 8 of these. I'm sorry, all 4 of these, and they'll actually connect to the drive. But these are the upgraded piece, because evidently the original kit had issues with the drive shafts coming out due to steering angles. So there's a lot of small components on this. I suggest you come up with some time-saving ways to deal with the repetitive tasks. One of them is getting these snap rings on all of these shafts. So I'm going to do one end of them, and then I'll slide them into the fixture, and then I'll do the other. So at least now I've only got to put one of these snap rings in. I'll do all 8 of these, or I'm sorry, the remaining 3 of these, and then I'll put each one of those shafts together, the remaining 3, and then put them all in. So you can see I put all the grub screws in each one of the pieces that needed them, the pinions. And then I'll press on each one of the bearings, and then I'll assemble them all. Alright, so now we're going to be doing the gearbox. So this one's going to take a little bit of time. We want to make sure I'm going to dry fit everything before I put anything together. Make sure everything moves the way it should. Then I'll actually go ahead and tighten this all down. But as you can see, it's not all that complex. It's not much different than what we're doing. A bunch of drive shafts, gears, and then the 2 casing pieces. Alright, I'm going to put this together here. So, I like to use these 1, 2, 3 blocks, which I use for machining and other stuff, but they're good for good stable platform for putting parts together. So the first part I've already done, which is the main. Now all these sub shafts, they all just sit in here evidently. They nest on top of each other, each gear does. So, just like that. Now they nest inside each other. So there's the third gear set. So hold on, I think I'm going to go get some oil for it, just so they don't chop each other up. Alright, so it's all together. I just have to put the case, and they actually move pretty good. Concerns because of the quality of the metal on these gears, especially because it's a 540 motor, which have a fair amount of torque on it. But this is German made, so I'm willing to give it a shot. Really nice tool. I like the way it ratchets. Especially for the hex keys, they're made well. Unfortunately, what I would suggest if you're going to use it for all around and you're not gunsmithing is you get the hardened ones. I got the ones for gunsmithing, and the tips are made a little bit softer so that your screw doesn't strip out. Not necessarily your concern when you're doing hobby type stuff. Alright, so you can kind of see how this is all going to go together. It'll have a series of gearboxes and pinions that connect the ring gear between all of them, a central gearbox, and then the motor that would feed it. The motor, I assume, will feed up into here, the top of the box. Looks pretty straightforward. A lot of small parts, just take your time with it. It's not that difficult. So here's the complete drivetrain, at least as far as the gears go. A lot of really tiny parts. Did run into some issue. The bearings that they include with this are rubbish. The quality control on the bearings is not good. Some slide right on these shafts. Others you have to use a press. And then I had one that you're not going to be able to see because it's so small with this camera, but basically came apart as I tried to press it. So it was a good thing I still had the nylon pieces. So I put one of those in, and in the instructions they give you the size bearings that you could use back when it was an option for the kit. And so what I suggest is you just order, go to Boca Bearing or whoever you use and get a good bunch of bearings to replace the ones that come with it, because the quality control on the smaller ones, I haven't messed with the larger ones, but the smaller ones is not very good. Alright, so the next thing we're going to be doing is hooking the swing shafts and some of the steering assembly in. And that'll use some of the new components. So, step 7. So as I said, it comes with bearings, but these are just the small ones, like I said, are not very good quality components. And the larger ones, while they do look decent, they're not sealed bearings, and if they're going to go on wheels and be run outside, they really should. So the instructions tell you the size of the bearings. I got some sealed bearings that are usually for like a Trax truck, including some sealed ones that I'll replace the ones I already put on the driveline. So here's the difference between the bearings provided and quality bearings. Now you can't see them, but one of the problems was getting these things on these shafts. And of course the tolerances are much better. It slides on like it should. The race should be right around the shaft, but it shouldn't be where I have to press it on like I'm doing axles for a car. So alright, so it's back together with the new bearings. Really pretty incredible scale drive. Very similar to the original with the 8 separate planetary gears and pinions. Now we're going to start with the rest of the steering components. So I just learned a lesson after searching around on the floor for about 20 minutes. The parts in this thing, especially when it comes to the suspension, are tiny, very, very small. I was using a pair of pliers to get something to go in that popped out of the pliers and went across the room, and 30 minutes later I found it. Keep in mind that if you can't find something, you drop it on the carpet. Some of these things, like this piece, they're not magnetic, so you can't find it with a magnet. Be very careful. I know that from now on I'm going to do everything out in the center of the table here so that I don't have that problem. So I'm going to go through how to make this portion of it. It is some very tiny parts. The engineering's pretty terrific. I have one of these swing arms, the CV joint, which I think is misdrilled, which will mean that if I only have one, I'll probably put one of the old versions on, and I'll put it in the rear, and then I'm sure that Peter with Xion will replace it. I may even see if I can fix it, but it looks like it was misdrilled. But as you can see, this is pretty intricate, and I'm going to go through here shortly what it takes to assemble this one piece. Alright, I'm going to go through what's necessary in order to build out the steering and drive components that go to the wheels. So we have the hub assembly. It has the steering arm. There's 2 bearings per side, but only putting one in because the other one slides out. You've got your CV joints, ball joints, the caps, and then an arrangement that came up that goes through the CV joints and actually secures it, because I guess the original ones had problems with it sliding out. So let's start off with, so this is the front of the vehicle, so we'll say what is traditionally the driver's side. So we're going to do that. So the first step are putting in the ball joints. And at first they may seem a little loose, but that's the way they're supposed to be, and you'll see why at the end. So it just passes through here. And make sure one side is recessed like a cup. My camera's not good enough to show that. The other end is flat. Make sure you put the cup side down so that it holds in there correctly. And again, I Loctited this with Loctite blue. It's a suspension component. It's going to be under load. You don't want to do that. At least I do that. So what I've found is the castings on these aren't that great. You're not going to be able to see it, but it's pretty rough. The outside castings, fine. Bearing slides in and out. Inside castings are rough, so what I've been doing is, because this is just some sort of a sand casting, I think, is scraping out that interior piece, but it still doesn't sit in there just right. So I forgot two of the components. The other portion of the drive shaft that hooks to the CV joint. So we're going to use these. Be very careful to set the bearings into place. So just push, and if you need to, take a light hammer, maybe a wood block, don't hit it too hard, but it has to be flush, and that's flush. Alright, so here's the next part that had me chasing around parts on my floor for a little while there. So, and I suggest you test fit these, which I will do. I've got big fingers, so it's hard to see, but so that slides in there. So here's how it all goes together. CV joint slides into here. These are the ones that I've found have some irregularities that I may be stuck with. I may not be able to fix. I found. Alright, so I have the last two steering arms, CV joints that I have to do. All the rest are done. These last two may be a little bit difficult, and the reason why is that these very small pins that hold them together, having a difficult time getting those pins to set in these last two. So here's how they go together. You have this small plug, this small pin. So this is part of the retainer for the CV joint, the drive shaft. So this slides through here to the top, and here's the problem. These last two were ones that had a hard time getting. They didn't slot it correctly, and it's hard to see, but the pin should be able to protrude through there. So what I'm going to try to do is force it and then try to work it around a bit to see if I can loosen it up. So I'll try the other one. If this doesn't work, then I'll get the Dremel out. And if that doesn't work, I'll install the original non-retaining CV joint drive shafts. Just to keep it together. Yeah, this one's having the same issues. Alright, I'm going to try to see if I can't grind this down so I can get this pin should be able to go all the way through, and then it should move freely. It is very tight. Alright, took some time off from this. Part of the reason why was I had a couple parts that weren't milled correctly and had to get the replacements from Germany, so I'd like to thank Peter from Xion. He sent out the replacement parts, which were these that I showed you on the previous video, how the slots just weren't milled correctly, which are the swing arms. So what we're doing now is putting in, and you can see I've done 2 of them already, the rear and the front. These, I guess you'd call them, well, part of the steering, the trunnions, which will eventually all hook together so that the 6-wheel steering works in unison. So the first thing you have to do is, this is the normal size, this is how they come out of the bag. You have to cut down 16 of them. And the reason why is when they're done, they're supposed to be 50.3 millimeters from end to end. So about that size. So there wouldn't be enough without that. So if you have a caliper or some tape, that's the easiest way to do it. I like to use the caliper so I can be exact. So that one was, I guess I just lucked out that time. Let's see. So we are there on this one. So let me show you how you do it. After you cut it off, I suggest you take an X-Acto knife like this and just clean it up, just so you can get the thread going in there. And then really all it is turning these 2 pieces together, get one started. Once you get that started, do the second one. And don't worry about it, they'll land up straight. Even if you kind of get it off a little bit, you should be able to straighten them out as you're tightening them. The center shaft on these nylon pieces are hollow, but there's already a channel for these made into them. You can tell this one's got to go a little bit more. And now I'm shooting for 50.3. Gotta go in a little bit more. And why you're doing this is they need to all be exact, so that the steering, the angles are correct once you have these all hooked up to a servo. Alright, so we got 2 of these. Next step is loading this one up with a bearing. Again, I decided to use a different bearing, not the one that they had provided. I just wanted these all to be sealed since I would use this off-road. So this is pretty straightforward. The bearing sits inside that cup nicely. There's a screw and a washer. So here's the washer. These are the screws, small cap screws. These are the same screws that will attach to the swing arm on the hubs. I'm still trying to decide if I'm going to go ahead and go back through these and where the pin goes, maybe drill it out a bit. But they seem to be moving fine now. I'll be able to tell once it's under power. Alright, so pretty straightforward. The short end is what's going to hook to the servo. The long ends are what's going to hook to the trunnions. It's no different on these. So we'll go ahead and we'll set this right here.